When you started traveling, my guess was the idea to travel and just be abroad, or was the idea to travel and then make a business out of it and you did two things simultaneously? Or did the travel lead to expats everywhere?
Yeah, that kind of happened later. Expats everywhere kind of developed out of some of our living experiences while we were living abroad. But no, initially my wife and I, we were dating at the time. We moved to Spain together. We didn't live together, but we moved to Spain together. And the idea was to go and, have a living abroad experience there. So we started out for the first several weeks of making our way to Madrid, traveling. We spent about 5 weeks, almost 6 weeks, doing the very typical American backpacking, 2 to 3 days in each city. Don't think I would recommend that to most people. But we arrived in Madrid both with jobs. So my wife was working as an au pair for a Spanish family. And then I was going to university doing a master's in bilingual multicultural education. And a part of that course is you got a full-time placement in a school. So I worked in a charter school, I had a contract for 1 year, and I both studied at a university and then did this job as an auxiliary teacher. And then at the end of that first year, I was offered to stay on, even though my university program had finished, I was offered to stay on. And my wife as well was happy with her job and being an au pair, so she stayed on with that family. So our first 2 years abroad was stable, working in Madrid.
And that was 2009?
Yeah, that was 2009 to 2011. Exactly.
Yeah. I think I did read it. It was, I think maybe in the description, one of your videos about this was early on and technology wasn't what technology is today. And there's something about like smartphones didn't exist yet. So you had like a car GPS, TomTom, or
it was a Garmin.
A Garmin.
Yeah, it was a Garmin. Yeah.
Walking around in your hand. Is that true?
That is fact. And man, there were a lot of fights because of that silly device and just, getting lost. Because it took a while for the GPS to like actually locate where you were and point you in the correct direction. It wasn't always where you thought it should be. And sometimes you're navigating on driving mode where you should be on pedestrian mode. I mean, it's a bit of a mess, but I think it's much easier now with smartphones and trying to find your way around a city.
Yeah, I think it's pretty common practice that like travel can test, couples. I think that's like the ultimate test sometimes. I think it always gets a little tricky with stress levels high and being in foreign places and maybe not speaking the local language and trying to figure things out.
All of that. I mean, one of the first kind of flashpoints that we had was in London, and it's like everything should be fairly familiar, language and whatnot. But we're passing through a turnstile. And this is like just after we arrive, we're trying to get to the hotel. We're passing through a turnstile in the tube and Kaylee's bag gets stuck, and there's a queue of people that are trying to come in behind us, and we're not wanting to be the dummies that are holding up the line. And we end up pulling the bag through and the handle kind of breaks. So it no longer pushes down. And we ended up having to snap it off like a couple hours later. We had to snap it off because we needed to get it into the trunk of a taxi. And then from that point on, it was like we're having to drag this bag, handleless bag, from city to city along the way until we actually get to Germany. And we meet up with a friend and he's like, guys, let's just mail this thing to your final destination in Spain. He's like, it won't be that much, just get the address from Kaylee's host parents and we'll just send it on. That was definitely important because my legs from dragging this bag were just black and blue because as you're pulling it, sometimes it would catch up with you and just smash into your thigh or your calf, depending on how low you were holding it. It was bad.
Yeah. And that was during your 5 weeks and 2 days kind of per city, right? So I've done that before. Not for 5 weeks at a time, but I've gone on like a week, 2 week trips where like a couple days here, a couple days there.
Yep.
It's good and bad. I think I'm more inclined to say there's more cons for me personally than there are pros. Sure. I'd rather like take my time, but like if time is a constraint, then you got to do what you got to do. But I also have this mentality is like, I can always come back. So why do you think, why is that the mode of travel? Like, why do people go on trips or people go to Europe and they're like, oh, we can do 2 days here, 2 days there, and then we'll come home. But then 2 cities into it, you're like, this is exhausting.
Yeah.
Why did I sign up for this? And then you go like the next year, you do the same thing.
Yeah. I think it's a couple things. I think the first thing is you don't know what you don't know. and you don't realize like just how challenging it's going to be. Like this is not a conversation that typically people hear, where people are being warned like maybe you shouldn't do this. I think the other thing is people are, especially Americans, because we don't travel maybe as much and we don't make it to Europe as much, we get really ambitious with everything that we want to see and do. And I think that's a pretty big one, because you go there, you realize how close, at least on a map, how close two locations are. And you're like, I got this, no problem. Because I think we're used to doing it in the States. And in the States, depending on where you are, what region you're in, things can actually be further apart. Like two interesting cities or major cities can be further apart. So you're considering, okay, it would take 5 hours to drive this distance. But here in Germany, it might be like 2.5, 3 hours on a train to get from this city to that city. But yeah, what you don't realize, I think, is when you arrive, there's just so much time that you have to spend getting your brain caught up to, okay, this is a little bit of a new system. I don't recognize the language or understand the language. I don't know what the meal times are. So you can get thrown off based on that. There's just a lot of nuance to arriving in a city, and it takes a couple of days to figure it out. I mean, even if it takes one day, then that means that your next day before you leave is your only real day where you feel quasi-normal. And then it's rinse and repeat. We've actually noticed now that we have a kid, traveling with her, we've slowed down naturally, right? And we tend to prefer being 3 to 4 days minimum in a place because it gives us time to kind of get a lay of the land, understand it better, and just simply go slower. If we want to, visit a museum, a landmark, and something else, we can do that in a day versus trying to visit 2 museums, 3 landmarks, have the 3 typical dishes and the 2 major beers that we should have in that city. You know what I mean? So we just get a little more time to digest it all.
I like to find like a boutique hotel or something like that. I like to enjoy where I'm staying as well, right? Like if it's a nice hotel or different even, doesn't have to be, I'm not talking like luxury, just like, maybe off the beaten path. I want to take a minute, soak it in. And you can't do that if you're there for 24, 48 hours because you're going to be out and about and you're only using the hotel to sleep and you're not enjoying the amenities of like the place that you're actually staying at, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, one thing that we appreciate is when we stay somewhere 3 to 4 days is just being able to unpack, taking your stuff out of the suitcase and just getting things set up to where it feels a little more like everyday life. And we agree with you on like getting into a boutique hotel or just something that doesn't look cookie cutter. Yeah. So you get a sense of place and culture in that place. So we were pretty early adopters to Airbnb when that first came out. But, over maybe the past 5 to 10 years, maybe closer to 10 years now, we've started to stay at Airbnbs less and started to opt for hotels a little more. I mean, that's a whole different conversation, but we still find that hotels can give you a cultural feel, and then also being able to talk to staff members at the hotel, develop relationships with them and ask questions of what it's like actually living there is helpful as talking to an Airbnb host.
Yeah, I agree. In my experience, Airbnb creates a unique experience as well, but it's nice to be able to speak to staff and have some of those other things that sometimes Airbnbs don't offer.
You don't have to play like an escape game trying to get in the apartment. Like some of the Airbnb failures that we've had trying to get in apartments has indeed been what's put us off. Yeah. Less so than like the geopolitical situations that Airbnbs have caused in different neighborhoods and maybe forcing locals out. Although we see that and we feel that being a pain of locals.
If you enjoyed that clip, the full episode is available here. Go on, press it.